Good afternoon, good early evening, and welcome to this Institute of Directors event. I'm sure it's going to be most engaging. We've just been in the green room, as it were, as our pre-preparation conversations, and already really very interesting, very exciting. So an interview with Sir Lloyd Dorfman CBE, entrepreneur and philanthropist. So we're just waiting for people to come in now. The numbers are building up, and then we'll get straight into the meat of our action. So my name is David Stringer-Lamar. I'm Managing Director of Fortis Consulting London. I have the honour of being the chair of the Institute of Directors London region. So in terms of the format, we'll just have a few introductory comments, and then handing over to Alistair King, the chair of the Institute of Directors City of London, to engage with Sir Lloyd, and then you get an opportunity for the questions and answers later on, and then I'll close down at 7 p.m. I'll talk a little bit later about the Institute of Directors, of course, here in the City of London. So you can see my backdrop. It never changes, so it's always sunny in the City of London, as it were, but really, of course, challenging times, and obviously the news that we've received that London will indeed go into Tier 3, and no doubt that'll have a significant knock-on on business confidence, and very challenging times again, if I'm going to call it lockdown 3, but possibly that'll come up in the conversation. And also we're waiting for the drip of news regarding Brexit, and people discussing and talking about that. So the Institute of Directors London region and East region had a big discussion on that at the end of last week. But before we go any further on my comments, I'd now like to invite my very good friend, the skillful Jeremy Duncan, to let us know how we're going to engage this evening. Jeremy.
Thank you very much, David. What a great introduction. Just to say today, it's very, very simple to interact with us. If you go to the bottom of your screens, you probably, if you know Zoom, you know this well. We have a chat function. Tell us where you're dialing in from today. That'd be great to hear that. That's where you can start to talk to other people in the audience. But if you want to ask a question of Sir Lloyd, please put it in the Q&A. And the great thing with the Q&A today is that you can upvote the different questions. So really, you know, obviously the most popular, Alistair will be asking Sir Lloyd. So as well as connecting with us in those two ways, we also have set up a special LinkedIn post, and I suggest you go to that. I will be putting in the chat, I'll put the link to that, and there you can connect as well by putting your comments in. Just to say, we're also today, we're doing a trial streaming on Facebook, so welcome to anyone who's joined us on that. And lastly, before I hand back to David, just to tell you, this webinar is being recorded. Thank you, David. Over to you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Jeremy. So there's already people kindly putting comments in the chat. As Jeremy says, do let us know where you're dialing in from. One of the great things of these digital enhanced sessions is the ability to engage with many more people than we normally do outside the London region. Also, of course, the IoD is all about connectivity. So let us know something about yourself. What's your job, etc. What does your company do? Make some connections here. Reach out. Institute of Directors, 1903, Royal Charter, 1906. A powerful organization of business leaders, and obviously very much interested in the creation of business opportunities, or possibly at this time indeed business survival, another topic possibly to think about. The Institute of Directors focused on really 4 pillars. One, of course, is corporate governance. Another one is the high level of director skills, because obviously highly skilled directors make for better companies. Third one, advocacy. And you can imagine we're advocating a great deal with many different stakeholders in this exceptional time, whether that's local, regional, or indeed national government. And the fourth one, directly applicable to tonight's conversation, is all about entrepreneurship, enterprise, creating opportunities, creating businesses, creating new ways of doing things, innovation and agility. And certainly within all that, we talk a lot about ESG, and how that's going to be affected possibly as we go forward. Some really interesting articles over the weekend, of course, about will ESG actually fall further down the agenda as people look at their investment returns and are very obviously concerned with the corona. Now, the IoD itself, national organization. Below that, there are regions. IoD London region is the powerhouse region within the IoD, and we have two strong branches here, Central London branch and the IoD City of London branch, which is running this event here this evening. What we're all about, let's try and make some business happen. Let's try and look at the opportunities that are coming forward. But of course, we need to look at the challenges and take a balanced view on how we're actually going to move forward. Of course, when lockdown 1 arrived, as it were, and the doors closed at Pall Mall, at the moment they're open at the moment, then obviously we had to go virtual, and the teams, the volunteer teams here in London, created the Business as Unusual series, as it was then. Well done to them all. Really, really impressed with how we did that so quickly. Now we've rebranded them Business Extra, because these are here to stay. It's a great way for us to engage with people inside London, outside London, and indeed outside the United Kingdom. As you can see here on the bottom of this slide, authoritative, influential, and insightful. These are definitely three things that we'll hear about this evening from Sir Lloyd, and obviously the excellent interviewing skills of Alistair King. Diverse, dynamic, and let's make it interactive. Put the things in the chat. Let's get going here. Let's have a great session. Alistair, over to you.
Thank you, David. Lovely to hear from you. Great pleasure to be here tonight. It's my enormous pleasure to introduce Sir Lloyd Dorfman CBE. I'm always worried when interviewers try to summarize the skills and exploits of the people they're about to interview. I always think it's much better if the interviewee introduces him or herself, because that's they know the subject matter better than anyone else. So what I'm going to do, so I'm going to say hello to Sir Lloyd. Sir Lloyd, hello, good to see you.
Alistair, good evening, and very good to be with you and all the others on the screen, as it were. And thank you for inviting me.
Great, it's lovely to see you here. Sir Lloyd, I thought I'd just ask you just to spend a few moments just talking a little bit about yourself and your background, perhaps where you started from, and then go on to say about what you're doing now, and then perhaps a little bit about some of the other roles that you do.
Okay, so look, I left school, didn't go to university. Originally was going to be a barrister. In those days, you could study at the bar without having to have been to university. Studied for a year, liked the bar, didn't like studying, met my wife to be. We got engaged quite young. My future father-in-law was sort of active in the city at the time. And he said, why don't you come to the city and get as much commercial experience in as short a time as possible? And that was September 73. I don't know how many people on this would know, but within 3 months, I was then sort of 21 years old. I was getting an absolute baptism of fire, because we had the quadrupling of the oil price overnight from $6 to $24. We had 3-day working weeks with miners' strikes. We had the collapse of the property market, collapse of the stock market, collapse of banks, collapse of the government. It was an incredible sort of apprenticeship time. I was going into meetings where not only borrowers were in trouble, but banks were in trouble. And I spent 3 years getting a really amazing sort of experience, I suppose. And then I wanted to start my own business, and I was 24, and I had this crazy idea to open up a little bureau de change. I didn't have any money, borrowed the £25,000 to open up this little bureau de change in Southampton Row near the British Museum. And in December, I think it was 1976, I opened up this little shop, and for the first 3 months, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, all there was me. And I used to have to shut the shop to go to the toilet in the hotel next door because there was no loo in the shop. And my first customer came in to change 300 French francs, if you remember what they were. And I always say, you never know, you might see them back again one day. And sort of 8 years on, this one little shop became the world's largest retail foreign exchange business, the Travelex business. I sold that and left there about 6 years ago. It's had a tough time this year, as some people would know, but anyway, that's another story. And today, I have a whole range of different business interests. I'm not actually running anything anymore, but we're quite involved. We have board representation. We try and help these businesses grow. And they range from flexible office property businesses to media, to fintech, to Doddle, my software e-commerce platform business, which is doing some exciting things at the moment, to the London Theatre Company, which is the Bridge Theatre run by Nick Hyten and Nick Starr, and a sort of whole portfolio of different business interests. And then on the sort of charity side, I sit on 7 charity boards at the moment. They include, I chair Prince's Trust International. I did chair Prince's Trust in the UK, and this is the Prince of Wales is it's only 5 years old, and this is about taking Prince's Trust around the world. I'm also on the board of the Royal Opera House. I'm on the board of the Royal Academy Trust. I'm on the board of BAFTA. I'm on the board of the Holocaust Memorial Trust, which is trying to build this memorial and learning centre in the gardens next to the House of Parliament. And I'm deputy chairman of an organisation called the Community Security Trust, which deals with anti-Semitism and the protection of the Jewish community. And then I'm involved with our own family foundation as well. I'm also 2.5 years ago, I became honorary colonel of the 3rd Battalion of the Princess of Wales Royal Regiment. So just when most people in the military are retiring, I sort of got, as it were, called up, and that's been a very special relationship, which taken me into a whole new world. I come from no military background whatsoever, I do a whole range of different things. So, my wife and I, we're married for life, but not for lunch. The last thing she wants me to do is be hanging around at home, excluding lockdowns, of course. So I'm sort of, I'm busy doing lots of things.
I mean, that's an extraordinary list, Sir Lloyd. I can honestly say that's the longest list I've heard. I mean, these two. So, well done you for your incredible eclecticism when putting together this together, well done for keeping so busy. Obviously, we're going through the most extraordinary time, Sir Lloyd. I mean, in some ways similar to 73, 74, as you were discussing sort of earlier. Perhaps you could just give an idea of your views on the state of the UK economy, and perhaps, given that you're from a financial services background, perhaps say a little bit about financial services as well.
Okay, well, I mean, unless you've just landed from the planet Zog, you'll be aware that we have not just one economic whammy ahead of us, but we've got 2. We're sort of struggling to get through the impact of COVID. I mean, this time last year, how many of us had pandemics on our risk registers? How many people thought that we will have been through the year we've all just been through? And of course, if that wasn't enough, we've got the prospect of Brexit looming in literally 2.5 weeks, or whatever it is. I think I remember at the time when people were speculating about what the cost of Brexit might be, that I think there were figures of could be 40 billion, 50 billion. Wow, that would be incredibly painful. But of course, it pales into insignificance compared to what COVID has done to this country and its economy. So it's all a bit bleak, but I'm ever the optimist, and I'm a great believer in where there's big change, there's big opportunity. Yes, we've got really tough time ahead of us, but we're a nation, we're a mercantile nation. We've been a mercantile nation for hundreds of years. I think it's sort of in our DNA, and we just got to roll our sleeves up and get out there and do our thing. But COVID has been, it's been a horrid experience for everybody. I mean, it has propelled, whatever trends there were prior to COVID, good and bad, have been propelled forward as a result of COVID. I know in the e-commerce sector, for example, the growth that e-commerce has seen in the last sort of 8-9 months is probably the equivalent to what people were forecasting for the next sort of 4 or 5 years. The impact on the high street. You look at cinemas. I mean, here we are on this, this Zoom webinar. I mean, how many people did Zoom webinars this time last year? But it's become a sort of natural way of life. I think for financial services, this is one of financial services is one of this country's great strengths. We are world class in that. Let's remind ourselves. I think it's something you'll probably know better than me, but it accounts for something like 10% of the nation's entire economic activity. But we have a lot of natural strengths. I remember in this whole sort of referendum debate, one of the statistics, a couple of the statistics that really stood out for me were, firstly, that something like 50% of the world's commercial contracts are subject to English law. So, I mean, English law is a sort of global brand in its own right. And even a couple of other statistics, which I found amazing, that even with the introduction of euro, that London trades more US dollars every day than the United States, and I think trades twice as many euros as the whole of Europe. So, and we weren't even part of euro. We were never that. So I think, we've got some natural and historic advantages, both in terms of our time zone, English as a sort of common commercial language, our rule of law, and a sort of an expertise and depth of understanding of financial matters, which I don't see anywhere else in the world quite matches.
Interesting. And given what you're saying in relation to the financial services, you obviously a number of people still in the business. I presume you're speaking to some of them. Can you give us an idea of what you think the mood is within the financial community at this time?
I think everybody's got on with stuff. I think they've been making their preparations for Brexit. Whatever banks have had to do in terms of setting up offices in Europe, they've done that. I suppose from a regulatory point of view, they've had to do it. Do I really see Amsterdam, Paris, or Frankfurt as serious rivals to London? I don't quite. I think in the sort of asset management world, I think these markets certainly this year have been quite good to a lot of people. I mean, you'll probably know better than me, but I think there are a lot of guys in the asset management space that have done well out of the volatility we've seen over the year. Markets are incredibly still strong. I mean, it's actually quite difficult to correlate the strength of the markets to the sort of general geopolitical situation. So I think people are being pragmatic, and I think I don't know if optimism is quite the right word, but it could be worse. It could be worse, and and I think, as I say, we just got to roll our sleeves up there and get out there and make sure we put extra effort into doing lots of business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just wonder whether any of the reactions that you've seen from the financial services business to these extraordinary events, the twin events that you've talked about, have they surprised you in the sense of the preparedness for Brexit, for instance, these types of things? We're going to come to Brexit shortly, but are there anything that surprised you as to how financial services businesses have reacted?
No, I don't know if you've got something in mind particularly, but I mean, I think, I think that they've been quite pragmatic, and and I was a Remainer. It's all incredibly irritating, but my view, I've moved on. We are where we are. We've been through a democratic process, and this is what the majority wants, so we've got to get on with it and deal with it. And actually, you know, you look at the negotiations over the whole period, but certainly in recent weeks, and you know, sometimes I think you can over-negotiate, and I think the Europeans have sort of over-negotiated, and you know, I sort of just, you know, and I just want to get on with it, and it's get on with it and deal with it, and you know, I've created, built, and run businesses around the world, and I'm doing it again with Doddle, my e-commerce software platform, where we've recently set up important relationships in Australia, Japan, the United States, and you know, we just need to get on with it. And I think during COVID, I'm not sure this is what you were asking, but I think the one thing that we've all surprised ourselves is how well we've coped, you know, with the benefit of technology. Certainly in terms of the first lockdown, you know, everyone sat at home, and somehow incredibly we managed to keep the wheels turning. The deals were done, and banks carried on functioning, and we learned to cope in a very different way.
Do you think there are any aspects of the end of the transition period that we're about to hit? Are there any aspects that particularly financial services businesses, or perhaps any business, that are overlooking at the moment? You know, are you concerned that that any complacency has dropped in to the thinking of businesses, or do you think the business people are pretty well briefed?
I think most businesses are pretty well briefed with what they know. I mean, we still don't know whether we've got a deal or we haven't got a deal. So, you know, what does that mean? So there's only so far that, you know, people can actually be prepared. And you just sort of hope, behind the sort of grandstanding of the politicians, that somewhere, you know, that there are sensible, pragmatic people who are going to try and make things work. Because yes, you know, this is a bigger impact to the UK than it is to Europe. But at the end of the day, it's not an insignificant impact for the European countries either. And we think of the German motor industry, and you know, we're an important market, and one sort of hopes that somehow people are going to be pragmatic and help to make it work.
Understood. I'm just moving on from Brexit. You've run businesses in good times and in bad times, and you've talked a little bit about the bad times. I just wondered, if you were running an SME now, what steps would you be taking, you know, just now by way of preparedness for what may come in 2021?
Well, I think, you know, if you're an SME, you know, you've been through, a lot of businesses have been severely impacted over the last sort of 9 months. Most businesses, I suspect, well, I would hope, have taken you know, or had to take a strong look at their cost base. And you know, I'm a great believer in never waste a good crisis. And at the same time, big change creates big opportunity. So I think, you know, getting through the COVID experience is one aspect of all this, and hopefully, you know, these vaccines are going to start to arrive, and they're going to start to make a difference, but it's going to take a bit of time. I think, you know, keep your cost base down, maximize cash. You know, I wouldn't do anything too adventurous. I mean, there are some businesses that have had some fantastic growth period, experienced some fantastic amount of growth during COVID. You know, I'm thinking of supermarkets and you know, streaming businesses, other businesses that have sort of flourished during this difficult time. But on the whole, most businesses, I think, have had a difficult time. Yeah. So I think, you know, be careful, really, you know, batten down the hatches as far as costs are concerned, maximize cash, and sort of stick to what you know and who you know.
Yeah, very wise advice. One one of the extraordinary changes in business life that we've all seen is, of course, the phenomenon of working from home. The concern that I think a number of us have in relation to working from home is that, you know, people can work in the home counties around London and other areas near big cities in the United Kingdom. They can also work in the Philippines and in Vietnam, and at the cost of London jobs. How resilient do you think London jobs would be in these circumstances?
Look, you know, if you're asking me about the whole working from home phenomenon, I mean, yes, you know, that is, you know, that we've, as I said earlier, you know, we've coped. I think we surprised ourselves how well we've coped during this difficult time. But I'm of the view that we should not extrapolate that into this is a recipe for how to build you know, a successful and flourishing business going forward. I think people need to come together and to work in an office. I think we'll have higher incidence of home working, 1-2 days a week, I think perhaps. But personally, you know, look, you know, if you want people to collaborate, to innovate, to educate, you know, you've got to bring them together. You know, those of us who have nice homes in the home counties, that's all fine. But for young people, I think particularly it's very difficult. You know, the quality of the technology is, you know, varies from Zoom call to Zoom call, different people. You have babies crying, dogs barking, you know, not everybody has a spare room and a nice garden to sit next to. And I think that, you know, people, we shouldn't, well, you know, we coped, but that's what we did. We coped. You know, if I was building a business today or trying to build a business today, you know, I'd want the people in and around close to me. You know, you've got to have that interaction between people. An international, you know, people working overseas. You know, we've had the sort of the outsourced centers in India. IT is not difficult. The IT industry is not difficult to be serviced from anywhere really. That's probably the exception. But I think, you know, you've got to have people come together. I know there's talk also that, you know, regional offices or suburban offices are going to become much more popular. But if you're an employer and you're building a business and you want to be able to access a sort of the maximum or the best talent pool you can, you need to be in London, because, you know, then you've got access to people working from all around London and beyond. Whereas, you know, if you're going to have your head office in you know, in Surbiton, you know, inevitably you're going to be restricted to the people who live in and around Surbiton. I've got nothing against Surbiton, but you're going to be restricted.
Understood. I know one of the key themes I've been bringing out in these interviews, Sir Lloyd, is impact on retail. Now, I know that you were a financial services business, but there was a retail element to the foreign exchange you know, businesses that you had. Well, a question I've asked a couple of previous interviewees, Stuart Rose and James Timpson, is, you know, how would they try to reinvigorate the centre of towns and reinvigorate the shopping scene and increase the footfall into retail areas? And they've come up with some excellent ideas, such as relaxation of the parking schemes and fees, plus also trying to get some street theatre into our high streets to try and act as an additional attraction. And I just wonder whether there are any other ideas that you would have to try to reinvigorate the high street in these extraordinary times.
Well, I think, you know, creating street theatre entertainment, you know, is going to be is the obvious thought, and will inevitably be a big draw. You know, the retailer is going through a difficult time, but I think, you know, those retailers who have ignored and who have ignored or just half-heartedly pursued their sort of e-commerce initiatives, I think are and have paid a price. But I think it's a mixture of the two, as in, you know, it's it's physical retail as well as e-commerce. Yeah, I think landlords are going to have a tough time because I think retail rents are going to, they've been used to them going onwards and upwards, but I don't think that's going to happen for some time. And there may be more instances of turnover-related rent. I think some of the big shopping malls, I'm thinking of the Westfields here, seem to create an energy and an attraction. They've got cinemas and lots of other things going on in there, as well as restaurants and hospitality. Inevitably, people have got to be more creative, more theatrical. I do think also we've got to get confidence back in our public transport system. I think that's a really important element of trying to get people back to work, as well as back to shopping and going to the best shops in our case, central London. Relaxing or making parking easier, that's a bit of you sort of butt up against the whole environmental issues surrounding that. That's why getting confidence about public transport is so important. And people are going to have to be more creative and think about giving reasons for people to come into stores. I mean, the whole essence of Doddle's e-commerce platform, which is about collections and returns, is driving footfall into retailers, not just for their own e-commerce, but also for customers to collect or return their purchases from other retailers. Because long term, the growth in home delivery for e-commerce is just not sustainable, either from a cost point of view or indeed from an environmental point of view. And that's been stress tested during the last 9 months, when we've seen this huge sort of exponential growth in e-commerce at a time when basically everyone has been at home, and the carriers and the post offices have struggled to cope.
Understood. So Lloyd, can I move on just to some of your other sort of voluntary activities away from business? You've got an extraordinary reputation as being a great philanthropist. Is there what attracted you to the philanthropic way of life, and how did you get into it?
I don't know. I mean, it's something. I think I think there's a sort of within the Jewish community, there's quite a I'm Jewish. There's quite a big tradition of philanthropy, not only looking after our own community, but looking at the wider community as well, looking after the wider community. And over time, you get involved, you do things, and I think it's really important to, I know it's commonly said, but I think it's really important to give something back. And if you've been fortunate enough to make some money at any level, it's good to help those people who and it can vary from field to field, but people who have not been so fortunate or who need help. I think it's a privilege and a pleasure to be able to do that.
Understood. And on the subject of charities and voluntary organisations, I do understand that it's estimated that there is a shortfall of some £10 billion in relation to sort of charitable giving, and there are a lot of charities are in severe need at this time. I'm going to ask the same sort of question as I asked you earlier in relation to SMEs, but if you are running a small charity at this time, in a real difficult place, how would you, what sort of steps would you be taking now, practical steps, to try to ensure survival?
Well, I mean, I've seen it in the last sort of 8 months with some of the charities I'm involved in. Both, some of them are big and some of them are small. Inevitably, there's been a sort of reduction in the cost base, and also charities. I mean, I think it's estimated. I read somewhere that they reckon this year charities will have lost somewhere between 25 and 40% of their income, which is a huge blow. But many of them have taken to other sort of innovative ways of raising money. No one's been able to have the sort of functions or dinners or events that they normally have, and they've been using these sorts of events to do that. So people have been innovative about raising money. A lot of, people who are donors and supporters have, inevitably had a lot of requests from all sorts of different directions. And it's tough. It's tough, and I think there's no magic wand, and you've just got to, shrink your cost base down in the best way you can, to keep on carrying on with your charitable activities, and just sort of be creative, innovative around the fundraising activities. Prince's Trust International, where we were building Prince's Trust activities around the world. In March, things were looking very gloomy, and we were bringing back people from overseas. We weren't sure whether we'd be able to do any sort of program delivery at all. And if young people needed help before COVID, they certainly needed help now. And actually, we switched to sort of push on our digital capabilities along with our delivery partners. And incredibly, we actually ended up managing to increase the number of young people we've helped year on year, even notwithstanding the pandemic. So, don't give up hope. And, adversity is the true test of ability. And, just get out there and try harder.
I'm sure some of the sectors that have had the hugely impacted, should I say, are those involved in the performing arts. I know some of your activities, Lloyd, are very much geared towards the performing arts. I wonder, are there any steps that the government or other bodies could take to help that sector revive after this period of enforced hibernation?
Well, you'll be aware that the Treasury, through the Arts Council, has recently been dispensing something like 1.6 billion through a combination of grants and loans to a whole range of arts organisations around the country, which was huge help to all of them. It was designed quite rightly that it wasn't going to be 100% solution for all of them. Everyone had to, there was a big element of self-help required, but at least it sort of gave them a lifeline at a time when they weren't able to function at all. And of course, those are charities that have built up their own commercial activities through retail and restaurants and whatever else they do. Of course, they actually suffered more than most, which was a sort of bit ironic. In terms of what more can be done, well, we're sitting here tonight and we've just been told that London goes into Tier 3 as of tomorrow evening. My wife and I went to the opening night of the Les Mis concert show Saturday a week ago. It's probably the shortest run Les Mis has had anywhere in the world, because it opened 10 days. It will have opened and closed in 10 days. But it was being there on that night was very thrilling, to actually be in a theatre for the first time in 8-9 months and see a live show happening. With my Royal Opera House hat on, tomorrow night we're going to see the ballet. This is Nutcracker. It opened on Friday, and it'll close tomorrow. So it's, I think getting that vaccine out, getting people confident in public transport, getting people just beyond the money, that's really the ultimate solution.
So Lloyd, certainly in relation to the city and the City of London, you're known for being involved in some of the fundraising for St Paul's Cathedral.
Yeah.
Could you say a little bit about why you got involved with that, and how perhaps the best routes forward are what are the best routes forward for St Paul's at this time?
Well, it was a real privilege and pleasure to be involved in the St Paul's Cathedral initiative. I had a relationship with St Paul's which began about 18 months, 2 years ago. Funny enough, that came through a relationship I had already begun with Westminster Abbey, which was something else, which was also very interesting. And I happened to find myself on a Zoom call in the sort of early days of lockdown in early April. And Nikki Wynn, who is the Director of Development at St Paul's Cathedral, I mean, she sort of ended off this conversation by saying that the Bishop of London had been in discussions with the Dean of St Paul's, David Eisen, and with everything going on and these thousands of people dying, they felt that St Paul's should put together an online book of memorial for all those who had died as a result of COVID, and people of all religions and no religion. It wasn't just a Christian thing. And she said, but we've got no money and we've got no people because they furloughed everybody, and she's been told to do this quickly, and she didn't know quite how to get this done quickly. And I said, look, this is, I suppose I was a sort of right person, the right place at the right time. And I said, look, this is an amazing initiative and very important, because thousands of people were dying without proper funerals. Loved ones weren't having an opportunity to say proper goodbyes. There was a lot of sort of unfulfilled grief, if that's the right expression. And I said, look, we've got to make this happen. Don't worry about the money. I'll put up the money. And do you want me to make some calls, and we'll bring in some companies and we'll help make this happen. And within sort of, I think 5 weeks, we got this, we had created and designed this website, which is called Remember Me. If you go to rememberme2020.uk, and we got a message from the Prince of Wales, who was very supportive. We got interfaith leaders to endorse it. And I didn't know until it was explained to me, but St Paul's Cathedral has this historic role in the nation, or a historic role for being the nation's remembrancer for great events and great tragedies. And we today have about 6,500 wonderful messages and photographs on the site. And I just like to take this opportunity to say to everybody on this webinar that if you know anybody who has suffered a loss, someone dying, go to this Remember Me memorial, online memorial, and this is a way of giving them a place in this nation's history, not only through this St Paul's Cathedral online memorial, but we're also now fundraising to build a physical memorial in the cathedral itself. So everyone whose name is there will have a sort of permanent place in the nation's history. And St Paul's Cathedral, with its sort of with its symbol of defiance and hope, is the historic and natural place for it to be. And it was a very, of all the things one could do during this sort of experience, it was a very worthwhile thing to have done.
Lovely, Sir Lloyd. Thank you very much for telling us about that. We'll move to the Q&A now. We've had a lovely number of questions coming in. I'm going to start off, Sir Lloyd, with a question from Tom. And Tom is saying, after a career in the public sector and at the age of 52, I've set up my first business. Any tips for a new entrepreneur?
Well done to you. And it doesn't have to be just youngsters who set up businesses. So I think that's brilliant. Look, I mean, tips. I don't know what sector you're in, but I think the sort of common themes, if I think back across my experience, is firstly persistence, not always taking no for an answer, because as you build businesses in the early days, it's hard. So persistence is important. I said before about the importance of stick to what you know and who you know, and by and large, you should sort of stay out of trouble. And thirdly, sort of self-belief. It's there'll be those sort of lonely moments when you're trying to make a decision or you're not sure about the next step, and you just dig deep down and go for it. And as I always say, being an entrepreneur, yes, of course, it's about making money. You don't just have to be an entrepreneur to make money these days. But it's about being in control of your own destiny, about being creative and flexible. And I always say, you know, at the end of the day, it may not be the biggest ship and it may not be the fastest ship, but it'll be your bloody ship. So, you know, good luck to you. And I look forward to hearing heroic stories in a couple of years' time.
Excellent stuff. Well, we'll make sure that we pass that on when he's successful. Absolutely. Thanks, Sir Lloyd. I've got a question from Alex. Given the amazing rate of change and increased challenges impacting humanity and therefore business, what are your thoughts on the elements required for the training of the leaders for the future? So how best do you think that you know, we should go ahead and train the leaders for the future at this time, given what's just happened?
Well, I think, you know, look, you know, education obviously is important, and formal education is important. Although, as I said, you know, I didn't go to university. You know, I'm a graduate of the University of Life. You can't be that. I think in today's world, you know, there are many sensitivities. When I was growing up, you know, we didn't think about in the environment. I think today that's a very important part of every young person's sort of psyche, well-being in a sort of mental health way, being compassionate, and being a leader. You know, look, not everybody wants to be a leader, but if you know you've got the strength of personality and you've got the vision and you've got the passion, I mean, those are qualities, and you've got the confidence. Confidence, you know, is an important part of everything that we do, particularly if you're going to be a leader. I think, I don't know how you sort of teach those things, but I think if you've got it, you'll know it. And you know, if you think you've got it, then use it.
Excellent. Thank you, Sir Lloyd. Got a follow-on question from Victor. With currencies fluctuating and COVID putting most economies on roller coaster, what is your view on cryptocurrencies and how can they be used to stabilize financial markets?
Well, I'm a bit of a skeptic about cryptocurrencies, and I have a fundamental problem with any currency system or store of value which is not related to some central bank or government regulatory treasury type involvement. And personally, I think, you know, there are accidents waiting to happen. Look, you know, and who am I? You know, perhaps I'm some old dinosaur, and you know, Bitcoins are valued. I don't know what the value of a Bitcoin is, but it's been up, it's been down. You know, people trade them and make money out of them, and everyone's very clever because you know they've created this digital currency stuff. And aren't we clever, and isn't this great? But you know, it's sort of, I can imagine reading a history book in 100 years' time when they'll talk about the time when everyone convinced themselves that you know cryptocurrencies were a reliable, solid form of value storage. And I just think, basically, I think it's gambling. And you know, until such time as the central banks have a way to regulate them and somehow underpin them, I'm very nervous of it.
Understood. I've got another question here from Martha. You're working a lot with charities. Do you think that businesses and people should rediscover the ability to collaborate effectively together with charities?
Yes, I think it's an important thing to do. I think if you're a business that can afford to do that, you know, you should pick your causes and pick your relationships. You know, one of the most fulfilling things I ever did back in my Travelex days was to launch the National Theatre's cheap ticket season with Nick Heitner back in 2003. when half the house of the Olivier Theatre, which was the largest theatre, was sold for £10 a ticket for 6 months of the year, and you didn't have to be a student or an old age pensioner. And it really, it really sort of stimulated new audiences for the National Theatre. It was a tremendous deal for the theatre goer and for Travelex at the time. It was there was a sort of halo effect around our involvement in doing that. I think Nick Heitner says in his biography that when we launched it, Travelex owned the £10 note as a result of launching the. I wish that was true, but I sort of, we became synonymous with it, and I think you can do some very, very, very wonderful and fulfilling, and also commercially quite successful, certainly from a marketing point of view, initiatives. So it's a question of finding the right ones. But I think there's some great partnerships to be had between business and charities.
Lovely, thank you. So Lloyd, next question is from Michael. Michael's asking, so Lloyd, if you were to start over and create a business in this day and age, what sector would you venture into?
Well, I'm sort of, look, I've mentioned about Doddle, which is my e-commerce software business. I think being in e-commerce, in the e-commerce sector, is a very good place to be at the moment. Tech businesses are also very good place to be. A lot of them are, we saw last week a couple of IPOs. We saw Airbnb. We saw Dash. What's it called? Dash. I forgot what it's called. Dash something or other. And they had incredible IPOs, flotations last week. I think that e-commerce, techie businesses, I'd be nervous about going into retail. I think I'd be nervous about going into hospitality businesses. But I think e-commerce and sort of techie businesses.
Okay. Thank you. I've got a question from Russell. From your experience, can you provide your views on how the UK can further develop a sustainable economy? In particular, how can we as IoD members further support education of startups and the next generation? So I think the question is really, how best can we go ahead and support sort of young startups and the next generation of entrepreneurs?
Well, I mean, as I've said, I've been involved with Prince's Trust for, in fact, coming up 20 years actually since I first got involved. And I first got involved in it actually because I wanted to find a way to mark the 25th anniversary of Travelex by helping other young people start their businesses. One of the things that Prince's Trust was famous for was, of course, starting businesses. And many of the young people who start these businesses come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And there are some tremendous success stories. And today, it's important at every level to help people start businesses. And I think, IoD members, bring a certain amount of experience and expertise in whatever sectors they happen to be in. And certainly, for example, coming back to the example of Prince's Trust, which I know well, then many people, carry out mentor roles as mentors to the young people who start businesses. So it's not just about them finding a bit of money to get the business going, but it's also about having help with marketing and accountancy and perhaps legal issues, and having somebody they can call on to help them through those challenges, particularly in the early years. So to anybody, to any IoD member who wants to help young people to do that, which is a very worthwhile thing to do, then Prince's Trust is a place to go. And I would say, by the way, just generally, as we sort of brace ourselves for these sort of the double whammy, these two economic hits, at the end of the day, and there's speculation about taxation and paying the bill that for the debt that we've written, which we've had to do. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the only way that I believe we can get out of it is to grow the cake. And to grow the cake, we've got to do everything we can to build and grow and nurture new, young, and even some of the existing businesses. But that's how we're really ultimately going to get out of all this debt.
Lovely stuff. And I've got a last question coming from William. How old were you when you first realized that you were a natural entrepreneur? Was it during your school days?
Yes, it was actually. And I used to read the sort of business pages before I read the sports pages. I always liked business. I was interested in conversations around me going on in business. And I came to learn sort of around that time, I suppose, that, I know this is probably a bit of a trite thing to say, but it was important, was that it was actually better to have money than not to have money. And that mattered to me. And the only way I could think of doing that, of having money, was to build a business. And, I wasn't a currency expert. People think, I started Travelex, I was a currency expert. I was never a currency expert. All the things I've done, whether it's Travelex or the Office Group or Doddle, all the many businesses I'm involved in, I've always enjoyed and liked building businesses, and particularly challenger businesses. And, I've never regretted it or thought twice about it. And I can't say every day was the most fulfilling and wonderful day across 45 years of being in business, but you get some exciting days, and you get older, bigger, uglier, wiser, and you can help people get through their issues along the way.
Lovely. And on that note, even though I've got a big long list of questions that people have asked, but we haven't got time for, sadly. But on that note, I'll say thank you very much indeed to you, Sir Lloyd. I've enjoyed this interview very much indeed. It's been excellent to hear your wonderful responses, and thank you very much indeed for going through this this interview. I'm also grateful to you for your team, who've been wonderful in setting it up. So thank you very much indeed to them. And Sir Lloyd, thank you very much indeed for your time now.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
All best to you and good night.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It was a wonderful session from Sir Lloyd. I enjoyed that very much indeed. I thought he gave us a really remarkable set of answers. So I'm very grateful to him. Just in the last few moments I have left, I just want to talk a little bit about what we've got coming up on the Business Extra calendar. Into January, we've got extraordinary man Andrew Griffith MP. He's until very recently he was Boris Johnson's chief business advisor, former chairman of Just Eat, former COO of Sky. Remarkable man, and I think I'm looking forward to interviewing him. And then similarly on the 25th of January, Rohan Silva, who set up Second Home, a great entrepreneur and used to be number 10 special advisor in relation to sort of technological matters. So we've got some great things coming up next year. Look forward to seeing you there. Before we get to next year, we've got one upcoming event on Thursday of this week. It's a virtual drinks party for Christmas. That's going to take place online, so it is not affected by the lockdown coming up. And that's on Thursday the 17th, kick-off at 6 p.m. Details on the IoD events London website. Look forward to seeing you there. And then just lastly, to round up, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the membership of the IoD. So it's an extraordinary package that you get given when you become a member of the IoD. You get extraordinary access to business resources and research. The legal and tax helpline alone allow you a large number of hours of legal and tax advice, which is unavailable just about in other places for other business organizations. But very much there to try and help you build your businesses. Then you come up to the professional development, the courses and the training that you can get to do. But most importantly, perhaps, are the people that you meet, the businesses that you can grow, the entrepreneurialism that you can show. You've heard from a great entrepreneur tonight in the form of Sir Lloyd, Here is a wonderful place to sort of get to hear the people like that talk, tell their story in relation to how they did it, and then see what you can learn from that. So look, I do hope that you'll have a look at IoD membership if you're not already a member. If not, I'd like just at this moment to say thank you very much indeed to the wonderful team that's put on this event. I'd like to thank Jeremy, David, Sophia, Manuela. So thank you very much indeed to you. But most of all, thank you to the audience. It's been lovely having you on here. Thank you very much indeed. A very happy Christmas and a happy New Year to you all, and look forward to seeing you all again, raring and ready to go in January. All best to you all. Thanks very much indeed.